Never sniff a gift fish. There's one thing about my neighbor, Al Finley, that irritates me. Well, actually, there are many things about Finley that irritate me, but one stands out from the others. It is his constant seeking after immortality. Now, I don't mean to say that Finley wants to live forever, although he probably has that in mind, too. And if the population of the world should one day increase to the point where people are standing on each other's shoulders, you can bet Finley won't be one of the guys on the bottom. No, he will be up on top, shouting orders to the fellow down below to step along faster and watch out for the bumps. That's the sort of person Finley is. On the off chance he doesn't achieve immortality for his person, Finley at least wants it for his name. He is driven by this ambition. For a while he thought he might achieve lasting fame by writing poetry. When his master work, Ode to a Liver Spot, brought him bad reviews and several threats against his life, he decided he might stand a better chance of achieving immortality in the sciences. His anti-gravitational device worked but once, when his wife stepped on it while cleaning the basement, and it worked then only because she thought it was something that had crawled out from behind the furnace. After reading a book on Disraeli, Finley decided he was destined to become a great statesman. He won a seat on the city council and quickly became a master of political acrobatics. He now straddles fences, juggles books, and can change horses in midstream without rocking the boat. Nevertheless, it appears that he will not rise above the level of city councilman, which is a good sign that the system works. Despite Finley's pitiful failures at achieving immortality, he continues to pursue his quarry, like an untrained pup let loose in the fields, to whom every grasshopper is a rabbit in disguise. His most recent quest for lasting fame took shape on a fishing trip with Wretch Sweeney and me. Wretch and I honked Finley out of bed at 4:30 in the morning. He staggered out to the car, his gear in his arms, and muttered, "This is an ungodly hour to wake a man." "Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise," I replied. "The early bird gets the worm," said Wretch, chortling. Finley's face brightened. "Who said that?" "We did," said Wretch. "You see anybody else in the car?" "He means who said it first," I explained to Wretch. "Those famous quotations are probably both from Ben Franklin. Old Ben thought up about 98% of all the famous quotations." "I thought he invented kites," Wretch said. I could only shake my head in disgust. For a man with 16 years of education, Wretch was surprisingly ignorant. True, all 16 years were spent in grade school, but he should have learned something. Finley had turned thoughtful, as he does whenever he is contemplating his own immortality. "You know," he said, "Ben Franklin is probably remembered as much for his sayings as he is for his inventions. But have you ever noticed how few famous sayings have been derived from the outdoor sports?" "Now that you mention it, I can only think of a couple," I replied. "There are the ones about a bird in hand being worth two in the bush, and a miss being as good as a mile. It's all I can think of. Anyway, probably the reason there are so few famous quotations derived from outdoor sports is that old Ben was primarily an indoor sport. You know," Finley mused aloud, "I bet that a person who thought up a lot of quotations related to the outdoor sports could practically achieve, immortality." I was instantly sorry the subject had ever come up, and tried to change it by asking Wretch if he had found another dry fly like the one he'd had such great luck with the previous weekend. He said he hadn't, and was darn sorry to have lost the fly before having a chance to tie up some duplicates. Finley, who had continued musing in the back seat, injected himself into the conversation. "For want of a fly, the fish is lost," he said. Putting our lives at risk, for I was driving, I twisted around in the seat to turn the full force of my glare on Finley. "That's "Horrible," I cried. "That is truly disgusting." "Curve, curve," Wretch shouted. "You stay out of this," I snapped. "This is between Finley and me." "I thought it was pretty good," Finley said. "People probably didn't care much for Ben Franklin's early-to-rise quote when they first heard it either." "Truck! Truck!" cried Wretch, obviously trying to distract me from giving Finley the tongue-lashing he deserved. "You can't just think up famous sayings," I told Finley. "It doesn't work that way. Anybody knows that." "Why not?" said Finley. "Somebody has to think them up." "Train! Train!" yelled Wretch. I could tell I wasn't going to win any argument with Finley, particularly with Wretch clowning around, so I calmed my nerves by concentrating totally on driving. I had seen men before who didn't know how to control their nerves. Wretch Sweeney was one of them. Even while driving out for a little fishing and relaxation, he was all pale and twitchy and had even twisted his cap up into a knot. I think he drinks too much coffee. "Never sniff a gift fish," said Finley. I could see then that the situation was hopeless. We would just have to let Finley's malady run its course. "Get it?" Finley continued. "That means you shouldn't be too critical of something that's given to you." I told him I thought that bit of wisdom had been covered by gift horses. "But how many gift horses have you received lately?" Finley asked, smirking. "That's right, none. Now, a gift fish, that's a lot more common, and people would identify with it." "Well, I'd certainly sniff any fish you gave me, that's for sure," I told him. Finley was quiet all the rest of the way to the river. I thought maybe I had hurt his feelings and discouraged him from thinking up more famous quotations. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The case was that thinking up famous quotations is more difficult than one might expect. We set up camp and spent the rest of the day fishing, or more accurately, practicing our fly casting. Toward evening, we picked up a couple of smallish rainbows, which would have been enough for supper with a couple of gift fish thrown in. We drew straws for the trout, and Finley and I had to settle for a supper of canned hash. We set 2 plates of hash out on a log, ostensibly to cool, but actually to let the darkness build up a little. I knew a man once who tried to eat some canned hash in broad daylight, but his jaw froze up on him and had to be pried open with a spoon. Ever since then, I've waited until dark to eat my hash. When the night was ripe enough, I dug in, giving a little shout before each bite to give any insect life a chance to escape. I explained to Finley that this was one of the lesser-known bits of wood lore I had picked up over the years. "Yes," he said, "2 bugs in the hash are worth 1 in the mouth." "There's some truth to that one," I said, "but it's not particularly memorable." "How about this one?" Wretch put in. "When all the straws are the same length, the man that holds them gets to eat the fish." "Arr!" Finley and I stared at him. "Now I've got one," I said. "The man who cheats his fishing partners had better learn to sleep lightly." Listen, you guys, I was only kidding," Wretch said nervously. I got the short straw. It wasn't real short, but it was short." "The man who lies to his fishing partners may wake up with hash in his boots," said Finley. "I like that one," I said. "It's the sort of famous quotation I can remember." It was a mistake to offer Finley encouragement. As we lay in our sleeping bags, Wretch and I trying to get to sleep, Finley ran off one freshly minted famous outdoor quotation after another. The pessimist complains that he just lost a lunker, and the optimist brags he just had a great strike. What the tourist terms a plague of insects, the fisherman calls a fine hatch. No fisherman ever bragged that the huge fish he hooked turned out to be a log. What do you think of those? He asked. Shut up and go to sleep is what I think of them, I growled. Or to put it another way, how would you like a sock in the mouth? All that's gruff isn't tough, Say, that's a pretty good... It wasn't one of my clean socks, either. The next day there was no holding Finley back. From way off down the stream he shouted at Wretch and me, "I got one! I got one!" Naturally, Wretch and I rushed off toward him. When we arrived, too late it appeared, Finley was standing there sorting through his fly box. Did you lose it?" I asked. He looked up and smiled. A man who fishes in sneakers never gets in over the tops of his waders. What? You got to admit that's a pretty good one, he said. So where's the fish? Wretch gasped, his mental agility having peaked at age 6. There is no fish, I explained, plucking a section of Devil's Club from my armpit. There is only another famous outdoor quotation. Wretch removed a small pine cone from his ear. Listen, we could say he wandered off into the woods and disappeared. Nobody would know. Nobody would care. Finley calmly tied on a fly and made a dismal cast that fell a good 10 feet short of the pool he was aiming for. Inexplicably, a nice rainbow glommed the fly. A cast that reaches a fish is never too short, he said smugly. I'd better write that one down. Wretch and I knew we were beaten and wandered off downstream. "Jeez," Wretch muttered. "If famous quotations were fish, he'd be over his limit by now." "Don't you start," I said. "What?" "Nothing." On the drive back home, Finley was fairly spewing with famous outdoor quotations. The angler who doesn't look before he leaps will have his next cast made of plaster. There is no greater fan of fly fishing than the worm. I have never met a fish I didn't like. Who was that fish I seen you with the other night? That was no fish, that was my muddler. Even a fish stick once knew the glories of the deep. And on and on. Finally, I screamed, "Enough, Finley, enough! You've invented enough famous outdoor quotations to compile your own Bartletts. Henceforth, no angler will give an after-dinner speech without first perusing his Finleys. Now stop, before you flood the market." "But so far I've only covered fishing," he replied. "There's still camping and hiking and boating and, of course, hunting." "Please, Lord, deliver us," cried out Wretch, who had never before shown much inclination toward religion. Finley cleared his throat. "A goose may honk, but will not wave. It is a foolish hunter who..."